take a look at labor relations. Employees and management often find themselves at odds. When workers perceive that their perspective on matters of safety or justice is being ignored, they might try to present a unified voice to management. Some workers have pursued this strategy by forming unions. When unions become a presence in an organization, human resource management must direct more attention to the interests of employees as a group. In general, employees and employers share the same interests. They both benefit when the organization is strong and growing, providing employees with jobs and employers with profits. Although the interests of employers and employees overlap, they obviously aren't identical. In the case of pay, worker benefits from higher pay, but high pay cuts to the organization's profits, unless pay increases are associated with higher productivity or better service. Workers may negotiate differences with their employers individually, or they might form unions to negotiate on their behalf. Labor unions are formed for the purpose of representing members' interests in resolving conflicts with employers. Some degree of conflict is inevitable between workers and management. Labor unions represent workers' interests, and the collective bargaining process provides a way to manage the conflict. For management, the decision involves whether the organization will work with unions or develop or maintain non-union operations. This decision is influenced by outside forces such as public opinion and competition. Contract negotiations in a union setting involve decisions about pay structure, job security, work rules, workplace safety, and many other issues. These decisions affect workers and the employer's situation for the term of the contract. Most national unions in the United States are affiliated with the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations, AFL-CIO, an association that seeks to advance the interests of its members at the national level. Most national unions consist of multiple local units. Even when a national union negotiates the terms of a collective bargaining contract, negotiation occurs at the local level for work rules and other issues that are locally determined. At meetings of the local union, they elect officials and vote on resolutions to strike. Most member contact is with the steward, an employee elected by union members to represent them in ensuring that the terms of the contract are enforced. Union membership in the United States peaked in the 1950s, reaching over 1/3 of employees. Since then, the share of employees who belong to unions has fallen. Now, it stands at 10.7% overall and 6.5% of private sector employment. Competition for scarce human resources and stricter government regulation for workplace safety can lead employers to offer much of what employees traditionally sought through union membership. Over 1/3 of government employees are union members, and a larger scale are covered by collective bargaining agreements. In 1962, Executive Order 10988 established collective bargaining rights for federal employees. Organizations are concerned about whether union organizing and bargaining will hurt their performance, in particular, unions' impact on productivity, profits, and stock performance. Through skillful labor relations, organizations can positively influence outcomes. Resolving conflicts in a positive way is usually easiest when the parties involved understand each other's goals. Management goals are to increase the organization's profits. Managers may fear higher costs in wages and benefits, that a union will make managers and workers into adversaries or limit management discretion. This outlook is one reason management may embrace policies and practices that lead to high job satisfaction, in hopes that satisfied employees will not be inclined to form unions. In general, labor unions have goals of obtaining pay and working conditions that satisfy their members and of giving members a voice in decisions that affect them. Traditionally, they obtain these goals by gaining power in numbers. The more workers who belong to a union, the greater the union power. Larger unions also have greater financial resources for continuing a strike. The threat of a long strike can make an employer more willing to meet demands. The survival and security of unions depends on its ability to ensure a regular flow of new members and member dues, so unions typically place high priority on negotiating contracts relating to union membership or contribution. Maintenance of membership rules do not require union membership, but do require that employees who join the union remain members for a certain period of time, such as the length of the contract. In 2018, the Supreme Court held the public employee unions may not require workers to pay dues because the activities may be considered inherently political and have the effect of being speech protected by the First Amendment. The court's ruling did not address private sector unions. Laws and regulations set limits to union structure and administration and the ways in which unions and management interact. Perhaps the most dramatic example of labor law's influence is the passage of the 1935 Wagner Act, also known as the National Labor Relations Act, which actively supported collective bargaining. The NLRA sets out the rights of employees to form or join a union, to bargain collectively through representatives of their own choosing, and to engage in concerted activities for the purpose of collective bargaining. The Taft-Hartley Act allows the states to pass so-called right-to-work laws, which make requiring union membership or the payment of union dues illegal because it restricts the employee's right to freedom of association. The union perspective is that unions provide services to all members of a bargaining unit, and all members who receive the benefits of a union should pay these dues. The Landrum-Griffin Act requires unions' actions with regards to its members, including financial disclosure and the conduct of elections. This law establishes and protects the rights of members. Enforcement of NLRA rests with the National Labor Relations Board known as the NLRB. This federal government agency consists of a 5-member board, the General Counsel, and 52 regional and other field offices. The NLRB is responsible for ensuring that organizing processes follow certain steps, and depending on the response of organizing efforts, the NLRB conducts elections. When a majority of workers vote in favor of a union, the NLRB certifies it as exclusive representation of the group of employees. This exclusive representative is important in the process. The NLRB also conducts elections to decertify unions following the same process for representation. The NLRB prevents unfair labor practices by educating employers and employees about their rights and responsibilities. The NLRB has the authority to issue cease and desist orders and halt unfair labor practices. Unions begin their involvement with an organization's employees by conducting an organizing campaign. The organizing process begins when union representatives make contact with employees, present their message about the union, and invite them to sign an authorization card. If at least 30% of employees sign an authorization card, the NLRB conducts a secret ballot election. If over half the employees sign an authorization card, the union may request that the employer voluntarily recognize the union. If the employer agrees, the NLRB certifies the union as an exclusive representative of employees. On the ballot, workers vote for or against union representation. They may also have a choice from among more than one union. If the union wins a majority of votes, the NLRB certifies the union. Once certified, additional elections may not be held for 1 year. Also, after the union and employer have finished negotiating a contract, an election cannot be held for the time of the contract period or for 3 years, whichever comes first. During the campaign, unions try to persuade employees that their wages, benefits, treatment by employers, and chances to influence workplace decisions are too small and that the union will be able to obtain improvements in these areas. Management may say the organization has provided a valuable package of wages and benefits and has treated employees well. Management also argues that the union will not keep its promises, but will instead create costs for employees. The traditional union organizing strategy has been for organizers to call or visit employees at home, when possible, to talk about issues like pay and job security. They may also reach out through email or social media. Another alternative to traditional organizing is to conduct corporate campaigns, bringing public, financial, or political pressure on employers during union organization and contract negotiation. An election to decertify a union may not take place when a contract is in effect. The number of decertification elections has increased from about 5% of all elections in the 1950s and 1960s to more than double that rate in recent years. In fiscal year 2017, the NLRB reported that 12.4% of elections were decertification elections. When the NLRB has certified a union, that union represents employees during contract negotiation. Collective bargaining differs from one situation to another in terms of bargaining structure. That is, a contract may involve a narrow group of employees in a craft union or a broad group in an industrial union. The majority of contract negotiations take place between unions and employers that have been through the process before. In the typical situation, management has come to expect the union as an organization it must work with. Clearly, the outcome of contract negotiations can have important consequences for labor costs, productivity, and the organization's ability to compete. Therefore, unions and management need to prepare carefully for collective bargaining. Preparation includes establishing objectives, reviewing the old contract, gathering data, predicting the likely demands to be made, and establishing the cost of meeting demands. The intended outcome of collective bargaining is a contract with terms acceptable to both parties. If one or both sides determine that negotiation alone will not produce such an agreement, bargaining breaks down. A strike is a collective decision of the union members not to work until certain demands or conditions are met. The union members vote, and if the majority favors a strike, they go on strike at the same time. A primary reason strikes are rare is that a strike is seldom the best interests of both parties. Not only do workers lose wages and employers lose production, but the negative experience of a strike can make future interactions difficult. Because work stoppages are so costly and risky, unions and employers generally prefer other methods for resolving conflict. With mediation, a neutral third party hears the views of both sides and facilitates the negotiation process. The mediator has no formal authority to dictate a resolution, so a strike remains possible. A mediator typically reports on the reasons for the dispute, the views and arguments of both sides, and sometimes a recommended settlement with the parties that they might decline. The public nature of these recommendations may add pressure. Under arbitration, the most formal type of outside intervention, an arbitrator or arbitration board determines a settlement that's binding, meaning the parties have to accept it. In conventional arbitration, the arbitrator fashions the solution. Bargaining over a new contract typically occurs every 3 years, but administering labor contracts goes on day after day. Contract administration includes carrying out the terms of the agreement and resolving conflicts over interpretation or violation of the agreement. Under a labor contract, the process for resolving these conflicts is called a grievance procedure. In the first step, the employee talks to his or her supervisor about the problem. If this conversation is unsatisfactory, the employee may involve the union steward for further discussion. If the problem was not resolved and does not seem to be a contract violation, the union moves to step 2, submitting the grievance in writing to a manager. The union steward meets with a management representative to try to resolve the problem. If step 2 fails, the union appeals the grievance to top-line management and representatives of the industrial relations staff. If the grievance is still not resolved, the union may decide, step 4, to appeal the grievance to an arbitrator. The majority of grievances are settled during the earlier steps of the process. This reduces delays and avoids the cost of arbitration. If a grievance does not reach arbitration, the arbitrator makes the final ruling in the matter. Employers can judge a grievance procedure in terms of various criteria. One consideration is effectiveness, how well the procedure resolves day-to-day contract questions. From the point of view of employees, the grievance procedure is an important means of getting fair treatment in the workplace. The shrinking size of union memberships helped to establish new approaches to labor relations. The traditional understanding of union management relations is that the two parties are adversaries, meaning each side is competing to win at the expense of the other. There have always been exceptions to this approach. Since at least the 1980s, there seems to be a wider acceptance of the view that greater cooperation can increase employee commitment and motivation while making the workplace more flexible. Cooperation between labor and management may feature employee involvement in decision-making, self-managing employee teams, labor management problem-solving teams, and sharing of business information with employees. Without the union's support, efforts at employee empowerment are less likely to survive and be effective. Union leaders have feared that such programs will weaken unions' roles as independent representatives of employee interests. In a recent survey of U.S. workers, 28% said that they had some form of management-established system to represent them. This management established system involves representatives of the employees meeting with management to discuss working conditions, including wages and benefits. While these substitutes may violate the NLRA, they exist because legal guidelines covering these systems are ambiguous. And the punishments that companies can receive from the NLRB for these types of violations are limited.